How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to an episode here on Let's Build Twitter. As always, I'm Ethan, or Unknown Coder, your favorite underqualified senior software engineer. And as always, if you guys do want access to a private repository, there's a link in the description down below that'll walk you through exactly how to get access to that. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop into what we're working on today. We need to buckle in because this is going to be a little bit of a longer one. But today I want to go ahead and try to basically wrap up the rest of the logic behind setting up new messages here. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and show the displayed users or the selected users at the top, as well as just clean up a little bit so that whenever we go ahead and hit next to create a new message, it actually creates it. We're also going to go ahead and try to avoid making any unnecessary calls to the database if we can. So with that being said, let's go and hop into the code and get to work here. Once again, we're going to be in the front end working. So the first thing I want to go ahead and do is I want to get our selected users kind of set up, and then we'll hop into Redux and do some of the other more complicated things after that. So let's go into our features. Let's go into messaging components, and then let's go ahead and make a create message selected user slash create message selected user.tsx, and also create message selected user.css. Let's go and hop into the TSX. So as always, we'll import React from React, and there's a couple other things I want to import just because it's going to be a little bit more difficult. We also want to import our default PFP from, this needs to go all the way back to our assets. So go all the way back to assets, and then this is going to be default underscore PFP.webp. And then we also want to go ahead and import a close icon. This can be called close from Material UI like so. Sometimes these are kind of finicky to import, so I like to import those first. We'll also go ahead and import our /create message selected user.css so I don't forget. And then let's export const our create message selected user and this will be a react.fc. It's just going to take in a user, so that's just going to be simple, a user conversation user. And then let's go ahead and just expand this, pass our user, and go like that. Cool. So this is going to be super simple. We're just going to have a const conversation users is equal to use selector. We'll go ahead and just import this, have our state and our root state, and then we're going to go ahead and return state.message.conversation users. We're also going to have const dispatch. This will be an app dispatch equal to use dispatch, and then we will go ahead and have a const remove user. So whenever we actually try to remove a user, we click on it, we don't want them in the conversation, we're going to go ahead and call this, and all we're going to go ahead and do is dispatch. We're going to update conversation users, maybe if I could type properly. And inside of this dispatch conversation users, we're going to go ahead and, I guess we don't need an object because we just pass in the array, but we're going to go ahead and say conversation users. So we're going to take that state conversation users. We're going to go ahead and filter out the user. So we're going to say user u.user ID is not equal to the user.user ID. So we're going to go ahead and filter out that user that we're currently clicking on and get rid of them. Cool. Let's go ahead and set up our return. So this is pretty simple. We're just going to have a div with a class name equal to create message selected -user. We'll have an on click on this, and this is going to be to remove. So we're going to go ahead and say remove and user. I don't know why remove user is not showing up, so that's a little bit concerning. Let's just make sure what's going on with this. Is it because I messed up this part? So let's go ahead and fix this. So it seems like there's an error here. There we go. So now that fixes that up. We're just going to have another div, class name equal to create message selected user, and this is going to be a left container. I know my left and right this time around. Inside the left container, we're going to have an image. Inside the image, we're going to have a class name equal to create message selected user -pfp. And again, this one we don't click on it, so we're not going to reuse that profile component. So we are just going to go ahead and say source equal to user .pfp. So if we pass the PFP, I actually want to go ahead and make sure it's not equal to an empty string, because that's kind of how we're doing this. So if that's the case, we're going to have question mark user.pfp. Otherwise, we're just going to go ahead and put in our default PFP like so. And we're going to go ahead and have an alt, and this will just go ahead and say conversation user profile picture. We'll go ahead and close out that. And then below this, we're going to have a p tag with a class name equal to create dash message dash selected dash user dash name. And this is literally just going to have the user dot nickname, maybe like so. And then outside of here, we're just going to have our close icon with SX equal to, we're going to add some styling. So our width will equal to, and it's like this, 18px. We will have a height equal to 18px, and we'll have a color, which is RGB. And inside the RGB, we'll have 29, 155, 240. And this is because I just stole this from Twitter, basically, in this RGB for our Twitter blue. And then what is going on with our close icon? Let's see. Okay, I guess it's just happy now. Let's just make sure. I guess it was just being a little bit slow, so we're fine. So basically what's going to happen whenever we click on a user to add them to a conversation, it's going to go into the top. We're going to go ahead and stack these side by side. So let's just go ahead and style this really quick. It shouldn't take too long to style this. So let's go into the CSS. And first we'll have our .create, maybe, message, selected user. And in here we'll have a height of 30px. We're going to have a width of just fit dash content. We're going to have a border of 1px, solid, pound E1, E8, and then ED. We're going to have a border dash radius of 15px. We will have a display of flex will justify dash content, and this is going to be space dash between. We'll have an align dash items in the center, and then a gap of about 12px, and a padding of 0, 12px, 0, 3px. Stole that straight from Twitter, and there's something not right here. I think I broke something. Let me go ahead and restart Vim really quick. For whatever reason, my IntelliSense isn't quite working. Next I have a .create. Now it's working. Dash message dash selected user hover. Here we'll have a cursor, a pointer, and we're going to have a background, dash color, RGBA. That's going to be 29. It's going to be 155, 240, and then 0.2. So Twitter blue, but with an alpha. We'll have a .create dash message dash selected user dash left container. So this is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to have a display of flex on this. We're going to have a justify content in the flex dash start. We'll have align items in the center. And we're going to have a small gap of about 4px on this one. Next we'll have a .create dash message selected user dash and then PFP. Again, pretty simple. Width for this one will be 24px. Height will be 24px. We'll have a border of none. We're going to have a border dash radius of 100%. Maybe. It's getting pretty late here, so I apologize. And then we'll have an object fit of cover. And finally, I have a .create message selected user dash name. And this one will have a margin of 0, we'll have a padding of 0, we'll have font dash size of 15px, which seems to be like a pretty standard size on Twitter, and font dash weight will do about 800. So this is a pretty simple component here. It's just going to go ahead and store the profile picture and the username, or basically actually the nickname, and then kind of stack them beside each other as we are adding people. So let's go ahead and actually use this. And we're going to also need to be able to add in some conversations. So we'll do that in a second as well. So let's go ahead and hop into our create message modal content and get to use this. So inside of here, we're going to come down to where we have our modal selected users. And down here right now, we are just returning a username with user user.nickname. Let's go ahead and get rid of this. So we'll delete all of this, and instead of returning this, we'll actually go ahead and return create message selected user. So here we'll say create message selected user. And then we'll go ahead and say user is equal to the user that we just mapped through. So now as we click on them, it's going to pop up there. Now this is good and all, but right now it's not actually 100% what we want to look like, because we want to actually have a dynamic height for our wrapper depending on which one we're in, whether we're inside of like the create modal or create group or inside the selected user list. So we need to go ahead and set up some CSS for that. And we also need to go ahead and go into Postman and create a couple conversations that we can click on. So let's go into the CSS here really quick and fix this up. So the first thing we want to go and do is we want to go into our selected users. We want to go ahead and get rid of this height right here. We're going to go ahead and create a new class to deal with that. And then underneath our create modal group, I don't think it really matters where this goes because I think I have it on down here. I'm not going to put it, I'm going to go put ahead and put it below the group. It doesn't really matter where it's at. I guess this is all group stuff. So we'll put it down here. Create message modal selected user list. So here we're going to go ahead and say width is 100% of our container. Padding will be 12px all around. We'll have a display of flex. We're going to go ahead and justify content flex dash start. We're going to align items, in the center. And then we will also have a small gap between each item of about 12px. We also want a flex wrap. So we'll say flex dash wrap will be wrap. Cool. So let's go ahead and hop on to Postman and set up a couple of conversations that we can click on. So here inside Postman, let's just go ahead and make a few conversations. So 5.1, we'll go ahead and say like 5.2. We'll make one 5.3. And then 5.4, sure. And then we'll also make a couple group ones to test. So 5.1 and 2, and 5.1, 2, 3, and 4. So just making plenty of conversations here. Let's go into the front end. Let's go ahead and refresh this just to see if it's going and working. We'll create a new message. There we go. So now if we click on these, it adds them to the top. And it should go ahead and do that. But you'll see one issue here. If you go ahead and click on this, you can see there's still a check mark over here. So we want to go ahead and work on that. We also want to be able to, whenever we click on this, to create an actual conversation in the backend if it doesn't exist. Or if it does exist, we want to go ahead and just open it up and not make a new conversation. And it should be in our Redux already. So we don't even want to go ahead and make a request. We just want to open that up. So that's going to be kind of like what the rest of the episode is working on, is getting all that set up. So with that being said, let's go ahead and hop back into the front end, go into Redux and get to work here. Back in our message slice, let's go ahead and go underneath our conversations. And I'm just going to go ahead and add a conversation itself. And this will just be a conversation. This is going to be our current conversation. And of course, this is going to break some things. I'm actually going to go ahead and say conversation or undefined, because whenever we first start out, obviously we're not going to have a conversation focused. Once again, underneath our conversations, I'm going to go ahead and say conversation is undefined. And then we also need to go ahead and set up a new interface for actually opening a conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and make an interface. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and call this open conversation payload. And inside of open conversation payload is just kind of a string token. And it's also going to have our conversation users that we are conversating with. And we're going to go ahead and say conversation user array. So we're basically going to go ahead and use the conversation users and look for other conversations with said conversation users. There's probably a lot better way to set this up, and I should have done this a little bit better, but we're going to go ahead and roll with this. So now what I want to go ahead and do is I want to quickly get rid of our open conversation, and this is going to break a bunch of stuff, and that's fine. We'll fix it in a bit. We're going to come down here also, and we're going to go ahead and delete this open conversation because we're going to go ahead and build one as an async thunk, so we do not need to export it from there. So now let's hop back up here, and below our load conversation, let's go ahead and set up export const open conversation equal to create async thunk. And then we're going to go ahead and open this, and we'll go ahead and say message slash open. Probably could have been something else, but whatever. Go ahead and set up our async. We'll have our payload. which is an openConversation payload. And we're going to have our thunk API, which is going to play a important role in this async thunk here. So we're going to go ahead and say const state of type any. Not great, I know, because I tried using like a root state for this. It didn't quite work. You might do like typo or something, but I wasn't messing with it. We're going to go ahead and say thunk API.get state. And this is going to go ahead and get the entire state of like all of our reducers, more or less. We're going to go ahead and say let conversations. And this is going to be a conversation array equal to, and this is going to be state dot message dot conversations. And this is just going to basically, if it doesn't exist, we'll just set it to undefined or whatever, but I'm trying to make it safe here. So if we have our conversations, if I could type, and let me go ahead and name this with an S. So if we have our conversations, and then we make sure I spell conversations right here, conversation, cool. If we have our conversations, we're gonna go and say let selected conversation users equal to payload dot conversation users dot map. We're gonna map you to you dot user ID. We're also gonna say let all conversation users or conversations with user IDs equal to conversations dot map C, and here we're gonna go ahead and return .c. Conversation users is going to be C dot conversation users dot map. We're gonna go ahead and say u dot user ID. So basically we're gonna go ahead and check the user ID arrays against each other to see if they're the same. And then if they are the same, we're gonna go ahead and basically return the specific conversation that we tried to click on. With that being said, let's go ahead and come down below here. And this is where things are gonna get a little bit crazy. So we're gonna go ahead and say for let I equal 0. Maybe there's a better way to do this, but it is what it is. We're gonna go ahead and map through all conversations with user IDs dot length and then I plus plus. Here we're gonna go ahead and say if all conversation with user IDs of I dot conversation users dot sort, and then we're gonna go ahead and say dot join by empty space, and maybe we could have done commas here or whatever. I think technically we are supposed to do commas, is equal to, and we're gonna go ahead and say selected conversation users dot sort and then dot join. It's gonna go ahead and create two strings for us. We want to go ahead and check to see if these two strings are the same. If these two strings are the same, we're gonna go ahead and return conversations dot filter. My goodness. C, and then we're going to go ahead and say C dot conversation ID is equal to our all conversation with users IDs of I dot conversation ID of 0. So this is a little bit confusing, but basically what we're going to go ahead and do here is we're going to loop through all of our conversations with the user IDs. We're going to check the user IDs against the selected conversation user IDs. And then if they match, we're going to go ahead and fetch that one specific conversation with that ID out of there. And then if that doesn't work, we're going to go ahead and come out of this if statement. And then we'll go ahead and set up a try catch. So try and then catch maybe E. And we'll return our thunk maybe API dot reject with value E. So if the conversation doesn't exist, what we'll go ahead and do instead is we'll fetch it or create it from the backend. So say let rec equal to await axios dot post. This will be http:// localhost 8000/conversation, and then here we'll have a body of user IDs, which will be payload dot conversation users dot map, and then here we'll map you to the user ID again. So we'll pass in our user IDs, and then we just need to set up one, get rid of the semicolon, and then we just need to set up our headers. So here, our headers we will have our authorization, maybe. And this will be a bearer token. So let's say bearer and then $ curly brace payload dot token. Excuse me, got the hiccups. So from there, after we get that, we'll go ahead and say let the conversation equal to rec.data. Then we'll go ahead and return the conversation. Now I'm a little bit concerned I typoed something here, so I have to kind of keep an eye on to see whether it works or not, but that should be everything here. Now we just need to go ahead and set up the handlers for these. For the most part, the handlers are pretty simple. So let's go ahead and scroll down to where our extra reducers are. So right below here, we'll say builder.add case, and this is going to go ahead and be open conversation and then ending. And we'll have our state, and then we make sure this is right, action. And I tried finding a way to kind of do a blanket for all these and it didn't really work. So let's go ahead and say state, and then error is false, loading is true, and then we'll go ahead and return the state. And then for filled, this one is a little bit different. So builder.add case for open conversation dot fulfilled, and then we'll have our state, our action, and here we'll say state is equal to ... state as we expect, and then we'll say loading is false. So pretty simple. We'll say pop-up open is true, so we'll go ahead and open up the message pop-up. We'll just go ahead and say conversation open is also true, so we'll say hey, open up the conversation. We'll go ahead and set the conversation to action.payload. So what is the current conversation? We'll go ahead and set the conversation users to an empty array because we're no longer trying to set up a new conversation. And we'll say conversations. We'll go ahead and just add in that new conversation so we don't have to reload the page. So action.payload ... and then state.conversations. Then of course, anytime we reload, it'll also show up again, but it's fine. Then return the state. So that one we had a little bit more work in. And then finally we'll have our rejected. So once again, we'll say builder.add case, and this will be open conversation. We'll have our state in action, and then we'll go ahead and say state is equal to ... state. Loading will be false, and error will be true, and we'll go ahead and return the state. And let me make sure we put rejected on this, .rejected. There we go. Now, this is everything inside of our Redux slice all set up, and that was kind of like the hard part. But now we need to go ahead and go through and fix a whole bunch of stuff that's broken. So first, let's start off inside of our create message modal top where our open conversations will be broken. So as we can see, this is broken. We're going to go ahead and pop up the user state. So let's go ahead and just say const user maybe state is equal to use selector. We'll go ahead and have our state, which is our root state, and then pass back our state.user. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to use this to go ahead and fetch for our open conversations. So we're not going to actually need our toggle pop-up anymore because we're going to actually open it up ourselves. Then obviously this conversation users is broken. We're still going to go ahead and update display create message because we want to close that. But we're going to go and say if user state dot logged in and user state dot token. So if that's the case, we're going to say const users is equal to our ... conversation users. And then we're going to go ahead and add ourselves in there as well, because whenever we create or open the conversation, we're involved in it. So we'll have our user ID, which is going to be user state dot logged in dot user ID. We're also going to have our nickname, so nickname, which is user state dot logged in dot nickname. And then we'll also have our profile picture, which is kind of annoying to do, but PFP user state dot logged in dot profile picture. And then if there is one, we'll say question mark, and this will be user state dot logged in dot profile picture dot image URL. Otherwise, we're going to do an empty string. So that's how we're going to go ahead and add our user, and then we're going to go ahead and dispatch once again our open conversation, which we might need to bring in, I'm not sure, maybe we don't. And then here we're going to go ahead and say token is user state dot token, which exists. And then we'll also have our conversation users, which will be equal to users. So now theoretically, whenever we click on open conversation, this should work again. It's still going to be broken inside of our create message user card that we set up in the previous episode, so we can't actually test this yet. So that's what we're going to go ahead and work on next after I remove this unused import, and then we should be able to kind of test here. So let's go back into our create message user card where we have a little bit more work to do. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to go ahead and get rid of this selected state, and we're also going to go ahead and get rid of this set selected somewhere in here. It might be here, because as you saw earlier, whenever we actually removed one, it wasn't updating. So what we're going to go ahead and do instead is we're going to set up a function for toggling the selected. So we're going to go ahead and say const selected is equal to an arrow function, and this is going to be very simple. It's going to return users.length is equal to 1, and our message state dot conversation users dot sum, we're going to say u, which is a conversation user, and then this is going to say u dot user id is equal to users of 0 dot user id. So if our user is inside of the conversation users list, we're going to go ahead and say it's been selected. So now let's go ahead and come down here really quick and use this instead. So obviously our open conversation is still broken, that's fine, but here selected, instead of being a state, it's actually going to go ahead and be a function now. So that should fix that. So now let's go ahead and fix up our dispatch and get everything else working, hopefully. And something else that I've found is that inside of like our messages and inside of search, there's also a verification icon that we want to go ahead and add as well. So we're going to do that after we fix up our dispatch for conversation users. So let's see here. We're going to go ahead and check the user state once again. So we do not need the toggle pop-up. We are still going to want to go ahead and use the update display create message. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this dispatch. And what we're going to go ahead and do is below this guy, we're going to go ahead and say if our user state dot logged in, I believe we should have that. So if we're logged in, we're going to say c users dot push. We're going to go ahead and say user ID is going to be user state dot logged in dot user ID. We're going to do something very similar to our bar. So nickname will be user state dot logged in, and then it's going to be nick name, and we'll also have PFP, which is user state dot logged in dot profile picture question mark. If that's the case, we'll say user state dot logged in dot profile picture dot image URL. Otherwise, we'll do an empty space there. So if we're logged in, we want to go ahead and add ourselves to that users list. And then after this, we'll go ahead and say dispatch, and maybe this should have been inside of here, whatever. We're going to go ahead and say dispatch our open conversation. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and fix this on the fly because I don't love this. We're going to say if user state logged in, we're going to say and user states user state dot token. This isn't how I have it in the code, but I want to fix this. And then inside of this, we'll go ahead and dispatch. We'll make sure we're logged in, open conversation. And then inside here, we'll have our conversation users, which is C users. We'll have our token, which is user state dot token, which actually exists. So there we go, that's good to go. And then there's one final thing we need to set up here, which is going to be down here inside of the generate nickname. So we're still going to have generate nickname. We're going to turn this h3 into a div. We're going to go ahead and say div. We're going to go ahead and check to see if the user is verified. So we're going to go ahead and say users.length is equal to 1, because obviously if it's a group message, we're not going to have the verified icon. We're going to say and users of 0 dot verified account. If it's a verified account, we're going to go ahead and use the verified. So here, I believe we should be able to get it from material UIs and be okay. SX equal to, we're going to do some styling. Width will be equal to about 15 px is what I found nice. height will be equal to 15px after I add in the comma. There we go. And this will be 15px. And then we'll have our color, which is going to be pound and then 1D, A1, and then F2. There we go. Go ahead and close that. So now if the user is verified, we'll go ahead and add that. And I think it's just being a little bit slow. There we go. So now we need to actually set up the CSS to make this a flex and actually put this beside it. So let's go into the create. I believe this is user card CSS. So we're going to come down to where our user card PFP is, because I found one issue with this. We're going to go ahead and change the background size from auto 100 to 4040. I found whenever there's only 3 profile pictures, it was breaking slightly. And I think it was because I had this size here. And we're also going to go ahead and center these. So we're going to go ahead and say background dash position is going to be center. And I think that looks a little bit better. And we also need to go into the nickname. So we're still going to have our margin, padding, all of that stuff. But we're also going to go ahead and say display of flex. We're going to have justify content in the center. Actually, not center. It'll be flex start still. Whoops. Flex dash start. And then we'll align items in the center, and we will have a gap of about 4px. So now if the person is verified, it'll be side by side basically. And we have one more thing to do before we test this out and everything blows up. We just need to go ahead and set up the search users to work as well. So let's go back into the create message user card one last time. We need to go into the create message modal content and use the create message user card for the search user. So let's go ahead and do that. So once again, where we are searching for the users, so we have our search content and we just have a div here. Let's go ahead and get rid of all of this. And here, let's go ahead and do a create message user, card, like so. We'll say users equal to an array. And then we're just going to go ahead, if I could do this properly, we're just going to go ahead and pass user in there. Go ahead and close this. And that should be good to go. So now we need to go ahead and see if this is actually going to work the way that we expect it to. Fingers crossed here. So let's go ahead and first start out going into the front end. Let's just give it a refresh to be safe. So now everything is rendering, so that's good. Let's go and open this guy up. So now if we go ahead and search for like Beth, for example, we can see we have Beth. We can click on Beth and it adds her. Cool. Let's go ahead and say Rick and Morty, and that's looking good. We can go ahead and close out of these, and you can see that those go away. So now what I want to go ahead and try to test is if we open this up, does it actually open up a conversation and everything, or does it break and does it make a new conversation, which it shouldn't. But if we go and click on this, it opens it up, and I'm pretty sure that was pretty quick, so I'm fairly confident in that. We're going to open this up and it moved it. It looks like it might have actually created a new one, so that might not be good. Oh no, what? You know what actually happened? It added it. So I might need to add some more logic so that it checks to see if we made any request or not, because it's just adding it no matter what. I believe if we refresh this, that'll go away. Let's see, or I could be wrong and I broke everything. Yeah, so it didn't actually recreate it, but if we do like Rick and Summer and Moordog, this one shouldn't exist. If we click next, it didn't open it up for some reason, but let's refresh and make sure and see if it worked or not, or we got an error, I'm not sure. So let's just refresh and see what happens. So we open this up, we did not get it. Interesting. So let me go ahead and debug really quick and see what's happening here. It's looking like we're getting a 404 not found on conversation. Let's see if I typoed something. It looks like conversation spelled properly. So let's just double check in the message slice that it add a slash at the end of the conversation. That's the only thing I can think of, which is kind of a silly reason for this to break, but it looks like conversation spelled right. Let's just add conversation slash here to be safe. And let me just double check. Let rec equal to await axios.post. We have our user IDs, and I believe that's spelled right, and everything else is fine. So let's just WA this, and let's try again. Maybe I just forgot the slash there. Let's give it a refresh. Let's go into our messages. We'll go ahead and try to create one with Rick, Morty, and Summer. It opened it up. Conversations came through properly. There we go. I just typoed. So now if we click on this, you'll see it here. You can see there's 3 and it kind of fills out properly. If we refresh, it should still be there. So let's go and see. We can see Rick, Mortdog, and 1 other. So this is the one with Summer. I need to go ahead and also set it up to basically sort by the most recent message. Now, of course, some of these don't have messages, so they're not going to pop up. We also need to go ahead and fix the issue that, like, if we click on Rick, click on next, obviously Rick already existed, but if we come back into Rick, there's going to be 2 of them. And that's because even though we're not making a API request here, we're just basically throwing the return in there. So we need to go ahead and check to see if there's like a new one or none that's not a duplicate that we're not recreating them. Because once again, if we refresh, there's only going to be 1 Rick in there, I hope. Yep, there's only 1 Rick. So that's what's going on there. So that's where we're at. Next episode, I'll try to fix up some of those bugs. And I also want to go ahead and try to get this create group working. And once that create group's working, basically we're ready to go ahead and send messages. So hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Everything helps out with the YouTube algorithm. If you are interested in trying to see where we started from absolute nothing to get to the point we are now, there should be a playlist either in the description down below or floating around somewhere with like everything. But as always, guys, I appreciate you all for watching. This has been Ethan on Coder. Have a great day, everyone. And I'll see you guys in the next video.